I'm Carol Jenkins, and thanks so much for joining us for this special edition of Black America, a one-hour town hall dedicated to exploring the way forward post-Obama in the Trump era. The show is airing first live on Facebook, where we are taking your questions, and we have a live studio audience for the first time, and three great panelists, too. So for those on Facebook and Twitter, start sending your questions in now using the hashtag Black America Town Hall. So let's meet our great panelists who will share their great insight and very strong opinions during this hour. Rebecca Carroll writes cultural criticism for the LA Times and opinion for The Guardian, is a producer and host of public affairs programs at WNYC. Dr. Eddie Glaude Jr. is professor of history at Princeton University, where he also heads the Center for African American Studies. And Dr. Christina Greer is associate professor of political science at Fordham University and a political and social analyst in great demand. And we also have answering and handling questions for you as they come in from social media and from here in the audience. Abby Ishola, who is one of our great Black America producers, and you'll be seeing and hearing more of her in a little bit. So we have breaking news, panelists. We're going to get right to this. It's not often that Black America, because we usually tape, but in this case, we've got breaking news. As this show is underway, on May 9th, President Trump fired FBI Director James Comey, citing his handling of the Hillary Clinton case. He previously fired Acting Attorney General Sally Yates, State Attorney Generals, including Preet Bharara of New York, and his own top security advisor, General Michael Flynn. New York Senator Chuck Schumer requested all Democratic senators to be on the floor this morning at the time of our show. It's expected that they will be demanding a special prosecutor to continue the investigation into the Trump administration's relationship with Russia. So I asked before we started who wanted to go first on this. And since, Eddie, you've been on television all day, all night talking about this, what does this mean for Black America as a first question?
Well, it's a kind of confirmation of what we knew already. That is, that Donald Trump was not a president committed to any serious understanding of democracy. That he was in some ways a representative of the oligarchs. And this is just the latest example of that fact. I mean, one of the things that we do know is that Trump flouts democratic norms. This is just the latest instance. But I want to insist that we understand this action within a broader context. And that is, we've seen since Nixon and even before, the imperial presidency expand, a kind of expansion of executive power. And whether it was Nixon or whether it was Obama, we should have been concerned about the extension of the executive power, such that if you get a person like Donald Trump in that position, you will see this sort of abuse, right? So it is, in fact, the problem. Donald Trump is the problem, but he's a problem within a larger problem, and that is the expansion of executive power. So this is happening at the moment in which I think he's not so worried about what they have on him with regards to Russian collusion. I think he's worried about what they're about to have on him. And so this is an interruption of that process, but I think it has to be understood within this broader context.
Yeah, I mean, and going off what Eddie was saying, you know, the Constitution only gives the president two powers, right? Because keep in mind, the framers were so afraid of, you know, the king. And so they wanted to make sure that the role of the executive was quite small. And that's why, you know, George Washington was chosen, because he didn't want it, right? He had no heirs, right? And so there are all these things. Right, it's like you always want the person who doesn't want the job, right? And so they only gave him two powers. One is the veto and the other is the executive order. And so over time, the last 45 presidents have slowly expanded the office, and they have not contracted it. This is, you know, in president number 45, he has probably not read the Constitution. He doesn't understand it because he hasn't read it, and he definitely doesn't respect it. And the only way the Constitution works in the separation of powers with the executive, the legislative, and the judicial is if everyone plays their part. And if the president isn't playing his part because he doesn't really understand his part, then we're in a really, really dangerous position. And especially for Black America, because this is a man who has no track record of ever being progressive when it comes to Black America. He does have a track record, though, of racism, of segregation, of redlining, of making sure he's taken out a full-page ad in the New York Times to, talk about the Central Park Five. He's never apologized for calling for the death penalty for these young men after they were proven innocent. He spent 8 years, denigrating the President of the United States, sort of saying, show me your papers, even after he was proven wrong.
I don't think he ever apologized for that.
He never apologized for that,
Yeah,
and he could never prove that he was wrong. So his track record with Black America is actually pretty clear, right?
Right,
And
Rebecca?
so,
Rebecca?
I just wanted to say that what he doesn't understand public policy, but what he does understand is that most Americans don't understand public policy. And that's why he tweets. That's why
he also had a
has
12-year head start of being in the media.
Twitter.
He understands media.
Right, he understands media, but he also understands, sort of the internet culture which is the medium of this generation. What I feel hopeful about is that, who else understands Twitter? Black folks. And that we have used that platform to create hashtag social media activism, memes and GIFs, and the whole social media movement is rife with resistance, Black resistance. So I feel like somewhere along the way, there's hope that we can kind of shift the dialogue and capitalize on the fact that he's in our territory on Twitter.
Yeah, I want to mention two things. One, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who apparently, it seemed to most of us, had recused himself from having anything to do with Hillary Clinton or the Russian investigation, and was a part of this firing, of the letters that went out explaining why Jim Comey had to go. And the other thing is that the Obama administration, remember in the last days, there were reports that they were secretly trying to hide the trail of the relationship between the Trump administration and Russia. So those two things, comment on, Barack Obama saw something was coming down the pike. He apparently personally told Donald Trump, don't hire General Flynn, there's bad news here.
There was some concern, and rightfully so, as it has played itself out, that if the Trump administration had found out earlier about the sanctions that were coming, the new sanctions that were coming down the pipe, that if they had been made aware of some of the investigations that were taking place around Trump's associates, that they would kind of intervene and interrupt. So there was, I think, a reasonable effort to keep it out of view of the Trump folks. And we see why now. I think in terms of Jeff Sessions and his participation in the firing of Jim Comey after his confirmation hearing saying that he would recuse himself, and then after the big press conference saying that he would recuse himself, is consistent with an administration that has been defined by lies, hypocrisy, and greed. So these people will tell you one thing and do another and expect you, right, to just simply accept it.
Well, because so many of the senators and Republican members of Congress are just falling in line, And as Rebecca said, it's the resistance. And I would say Black women specifically, Jason Johnson had a great piece in The Root. Black women are the kryptonite to the GOP. Right. We are not buying anything they're selling. We have never bought it. We're not interested in it. And they can just keep lying and keep saying things. And we're sort of the only ones who are just like, yeah, I see you. I see you for who you are and what you're doing. Right. And I think this particular administration is filled with people also who don't understand Washington, D.C. And so the role of how all of these, there's a level of respect. There should be some sort of elitism to the White House, right? I want my president to be smarter than me. I don't mind that my president, sort of has really smart people around him. This is, Trump has hired people who don't respect the offices that he's put them in. They want to destroy
the people who voted for Trump don't want their president to be smarter than him.
Right.
But speaking of a smart president, let's go back to Barack Obama for a minute.
So long ago. So long ago.
In his post-presidency, has gotten into a little bit of hot water because he's doing the speaking circuit. He's in Milan now during this period, $3+ million for a climate speech and a $400,000 speech to the bankers. I want to listen though to Trevor Noah, who has a take on some of the negative reaction to President Obama. Let's listen.
So the first Black president must also be the first one to not take money afterwards? No, my friend. He can't be the first of everything. That and you. Yeah, I said it.
So not just black women. There's a black guy,
Right.
you know, who has a comment. Eddie, talk to us a little bit about your response to what President Obama is doing in his post. But he did give $1 million to city kids in Chicago.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Good for him. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look,
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I don't see what the big deal is.
Yeah.
Why he can't get his coin? I just don't understand that.
So-
It's a job. He doesn't have a job right now.
Private citizen.
I want
He's
to
a
be
private
very.
citizen. Yeah.
He doesn't have a job.
He
It is
doesn't.
the way in which I understand how we struggle around a society that is oligarchic, a society in which the 1% and the top 1/10 of a percent garner most of the income gains and wealth, while the bottom quintile suffers. My understanding of how we intervene in that is not to replace white oligarchs with black oligarchs, is not to have black people inside the game, to change just the color of the game. So I don't want to begrudge President Obama. If somebody's out here on the academic circuit getting paid $50,000 and $25,000 to give a talk, I understand he's the former president. You get paid, but I don't want to undersell what it means for a person to bring critique to bear on Wall Street's role in our society, on hedge funds and those who run them, how they impact and distort and disfigure our democratic society. For President Obama to come out and to then go back to Wall Street and to get $400,000, it's just the optics are just wrong. I think he could have made a better decision.
But
now,
here's-
you want to jump in quickly?
I would want to say this as well. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So here's the thing. Both parties are in bed with Wall Street, right? Both. So when you look at who endorsed Obama and who endorsed McCain, Goldman Sachs will give 49.5% to you and
Absolutely.
50.5% to me. They hedge their bets. They're billionaires. They can do that. So my issue, though, is all of a sudden, we're in Barack Obama's pockets. It's like, he can get a pension. We didn't have anything to say about Reagan, Bush 1, Clinton, Bush 2, making millions after they left office giving speeches. Now, all of a sudden, everyone's clutching their pearls where this is all of a sudden a bad thing. And we also don't know what he's going to do with the money.
That's right.
We know
Well,
the Clintons had to pay off their lawyers. The Bushes were already millionaires. So it's like, listen, why all of a sudden, and I understand the role of Wall Street is highly problematic, but Wall Street honestly is not going anywhere in the political process. Bernie Sanders, I'm sorry, it's not working. Because guess what, Bernie Sanders, you take Wall Street money too. So I mean, we understand that they're here. So I don't understand. My question was, why is he only making $400,000?
Yeah.
Right. He's the first black president.
The $3 million was
I'm sorry.
was better. We have a question from the audience, and then we'll come back to this topic. I promise.
Absolutely.
Tell
we
us
have
your
to.
name and your question. My name is Amrita Ford. And what kind of money has he and his family made since he has taken office?
Well, it's been $60 million for
65.
a joint book deal that we know about, and now these speeches that are coming in that he seems to be taking for his foundation and then giving it away, creating the foundation and giving it away. I don't know what percentage, but most of it, like the $3 million, went directly to his foundation, and we know that the kids in Chicago got $1 million so
He also
far.
has to build a library. I know people are going to have lots to say when Michelle Obama starts making money. Keep in mind she is Princeton undergrad, Harvard JD. She worked for free for 8 years. So if she wants to make some money with some
They
speeches,
also
I don't
have,
see what the problem is. They're private
two
citizens.
kids going to college, expensive colleges. Oh, okay.
His family. And what have they made since taking office?
Well,
What happened?
Right, what's left? They're grabbing everything that's not nailed down to the ground.
the question is if we have a calculator that goes that high.
Yeah.
They seem to be doing quite well. And of course, it's this transparency that's lacking, that people keep asking for his tax returns and to know what relationship he has to African oligarchs, as you talk about, and I'm sorry, Russian oligarchs, and other parts of the country, exactly where are they making their money. So
But can we go back to this
Trump.
Obama? I think we can go back to this Obama question really quickly. And part of this involves not so much, again, me begrudging the Obamas making their paper. I'm not doing that. I think there's an overall critique that we have to make, and we have to be consistent in that critique, right, of an economic system that exploits everyday ordinary people and an economic system that benefits those who are at the top. President Obama has been represented as a kind of emblematic of a progressive politics, and it's been wrong since the beginning. He is a corporate Democrat, has always been a corporate Democrat. There's a reason why he called Macron in France, because he's invested in neoliberal neoliberal market ideology that Macron is the poster child for.
Yeah, so
he's not who we think he is.
But he never said he was, right? You know, because it's like the only radical thing about Barack Obama is his skin color.
Exactly.
He is right next to Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton when it comes to policy.
He's a third wave Democrat.
Right.
I grant you that. And part of what I'm trying to suggest here is that this is just an indication, right, of the nature of the politics that he himself represents.
I think the favorite quote that you use often is that he was a snake oil salesman. What?
I called him a confidence man.
Trump is a snake oil salesman.
Selling the snake oil.
No.
Selling
we shouldn't be name calling anyway.
Oh, that's Melville. That's not name calling.
We're going to go to a little tape here. So it's been a fast and furious transition from Obama to Trump, and let's recap a little bit. It all started off fairly, surprisingly civil. Donald Trump was received at the White House with an offer from President Obama to be as helpful as possible.
Number one priority in the coming 2 months is to try to facilitate a transition that ensures our president-elect is successful.
Then there was the argument over whose inauguration crowd was bigger. President Trump insisted that his was. There was no refuting the millions who took to the streets in the Women's March the day after the inauguration, although March co-chair Tamika Mallory cautioned our take on it.
So, yes, the administration is an issue, but there are fights that have been happening prior to this administration getting involved. And I like to tell people that Donald Trump is not the full disease. He's a symptom. The disease existed before he stepped onto the stage.
Things seemed to deteriorate as the pressure of governing increased.
To be honest, I inherited a mess. It's a mess.
President Trump's relationship with Black America seemed tenuous at the start. With only one Black cabinet member named, Dr. Ben Carson, at Housing, there was a distinct lack of diversity. His meeting with the presidents of the nation's Black college presidents became controversial when some alleged it was more photo op than a real meeting. The struggling institutions left with no more funds, but a move of oversight from education to the executive office. Meeting with the Congressional Black Caucus hit a bump when the president seemed to suggest that April Ryan, a Black White House correspondent, should be the one to make the introduction.
Include the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional
Well, I would.
Caucus.
I tell you what. Do you want to set up the meeting? Do you want to set up the meeting?
No.
Are they friends of
I'm
yours?
just a reporter.
No, set up the meeting.
I know some of them.
When the meeting did happen, members presented the president with their plan for Black America. It's titled What We Have to Lose, which answered the question candidate Trump often asked of Black America: what do you have to lose by supporting me since things are so bad under Obama?
Two things.
Yes.
First, just going back to what Christina said about the only thing radical about Obama is his skin. I think that is radical, and that is important and not insignificant to say. The other stuff notwithstanding. Then I watch this and I think of what Eddie said when we first came out, which is this is not new, and what Tamika said, this is not new. And when I was thinking about this panel and the way forward, the way forward is a white supremacist agenda is my origin story, is the backdrop of my origin story personally and also at large. It's Eddie's, it's Christina's, it's yours. And so the way forward is to posse up and stay alive, and so Trump, to me, as Tamika said, is not necessarily the problem or the disease entirely, but he's just pushing an agenda that this country was founded on. Mm-hmm. And so, we have to sort of go in deeper into our communities, our cultures, our families, our identities. And so that's why I say.
And do you see that as the way forward too? It's this: how do we get through the next 4 years turning inward, supporting our families and our
Well, I
social
mean,
activity.
if white supremacy is the norm
Yes.
of this country,
Yes, it is,
right?
yes.
And this
It would
particular president
suggest
has
that.
emboldened particular people to now make that the forefront, not necessarily a secondary or tertiary identity, right? He's also said, like, it's okay to be the silent majority now, like you can come out and say these things. Then, you know, not only do we need to posse up, but what Rebecca and I were talking about before the show started, like, we also need to rest, because this is a long fight. You know, whether, I mean, who do we have for 2020? This could be an 8-year plus fight, right? I mean, this is a man who is allowed to lie, cheat, and steal. And so my grandmother said, if you lie, you cheat. If you cheat, you steal. If you steal, you lie. He's been able to do all three with no repercussions, no real back blow, and with the full support of the federal government, because the Republican Party and some Democrats won't stand up to him.
Yeah, Eddie,
so, I
why
mean,
is
as much
that,
as we
though?
fight, we need
Yeah.
to sort of sharpen the sword, because this isn't going to go away by summertime.
Yeah, because everybody keeps saying, how is he getting away with this? What's the secret? Why is he able to do all of the things that we think are not the right things to be doing?
Well, I think it has everything to do with the kind of a Republican cabal who wants to hold on to the reins of power in order to deepen their hold, right, on Washington, D.C. and the public coffers. They want to privatize Social Security. They want to privatize public education. They want to in other words, they want the government to function solely in relation to their efforts to make more money. And to the extent to which that cabal is doing its work, they're fine. Donald Trump can say all the bombastic things he can, as long as he signs the legislation, that if they can come together, right, if they can navigate their own kinds of divisions, they were perfectly fine with having a person who's committed to lying, to cheating, and stealing in the White House.
Okay, we're gonna pick up on that, of course, but we have a question in the audience. Yeah.
Sure. My name is Joseph Payton. My question is two parts. Is tension, division inherent in our democracy? And how do we incorporate this tension in any political strategies moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, that's the origin of this country. You know, we had Southerners versus Northerners, you know, you had all these different factions from the very beginning. And our whole democracy is based on compromise, right? The reason why we have unelected judges is based on Supreme Court justices is based on compromise. The reason why we have, you know, sort of 2 senators from every state, Rhode Island and California. Like, everything we have is based on a series of compromises. 3/5 of black people was based on compromise with Northerners and Southerners. And so I think, you know, as the president says, like, hey, there are these things called factions. It's like, well, we know that. We've always had factions. It's, can you articulate to various factions so the larger mission? For Republicans, for many of them, it's actually rolling back an entire Barack Obama 8 years. And so that is their mission. That has been their mission from day one when he was being sworn in on January 20th, 2009. They didn't sort of, you know, fulfill their mission in 4 years. And so they're really trying to make sure that they do all of that now. Democrats, though, because they're in the minority, need to figure out how they can articulate their vision to a very diverse Democratic Party, right? We saw Hillary and Bernie and all the shades in between. So we need to figure out what 2018 looks like. I think once Democrats, you know, if they can get themselves together and put forward a vision for Americans and Democrats, but also people in the middle, and take away some seats during the midterm elections, then I think some Republicans might realize that they're a little less stable and would be a little more willing for conversations and compromise with Democrats.
I think also in terms of divisiveness, you know, people say that the country is more divisive now than it's been in however long, particularly regarding race and black and white race. And I think that it's important to identify that there is choice within that divisiveness. So you look at the march, which was demonstrably white women, and that's okay. I don't really want to march with those with white women right now. I want to take a breather. While they do that work, that's okay. And I think that if we're able to recognize that there's choice within that divisiveness, that it's not necessarily, I don't like you, that's why I'm not doing it. But you go ahead and do that. I support you in that work. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to sit that one out.
I love that Rebecca says she's just taking a breather, folks. Don't worry about it. Too much. I want to get to this. The National Urban League. I don't know whether you've seen their equality index, because the question always is, how bad are things? How are we doing? And it's interesting that they have sort of done this thing. So if whites are at 100%, this is where blacks are. In economics, we're at 56.5%. In health, at 80%, in education at 78%, at social in social justice at 57.4%, and civic engagement. Here we are, Rebecca. You know, we are at 100.6%. We are really engaged. So when you look at these numbers, you know, you sort of say that our health is suffering. Our, you know, everything is shy of what the majority is enjoying. So, I mean, but it's not zero, which is the way it's interpreted often, that we have nothing.
What's interesting about that data is that it actually shows that over the course of the 8 years of Obama's presidency, that there was improvement in most of those indexes, right?
Right.
That we saw growth, right? But in one area that is mentioned in the report that we didn't see, that black folk are doing terribly, and it's in housing. So with the collapse of the housing market in 2008, we saw over 250,000 black people lose their homes. And that's the principal source of black wealth. And so there's a reason why we've seen over the course of the Obama administration and going into the Trump administration an increase in the gap between white wealth and black wealth. And it has everything to do with, in some ways, the failure of policy, public policy, to address the racialized dimensions of the housing crisis. And of course, that means that many of our folks, the people that we love, have been thrown into a brutal rental market. We've seen, in interesting sorts of ways, a kind of contraction of affordable housing. I mean, we're in New York after all. Affordable housing isn't the most expensive place in the fifth is Brooklyn now, right? You know, instead of selling you a bridge, we can sell you an affordable house in Brooklyn, right? That's the
right.
But so we've seen this contraction of affordable housing. So what we're witnessing in this moment is some improvement, and what I think the Urban League report is trying to suggest is that the modest gains that we made over the course of the last 8 years can in fact be lost over the course of the Trump years.
Right, and I like that you emphasize that not everybody recovered from that particular depression.
Oh, when people were talking about recovery, we weren't recovering at all.
Right. A reminder to our audience out there, we are live on Facebook. We want your input, so send in your questions. Our hashtag is Black America Town Hall. Tried to make that simple. Long, but simple. Let's go to another tape. Let's take a look at this, and we want to caution that there's a bit of violence in it. A question many black Americans might ask is, will we have justice in a Trump America? Add the face of 15-year-old Jordan Edwards to the list of black children, women, and men killed inexplicably by the police in this country. Jordan lost his life when a Balch Springs, Texas officer fired his shotgun into a car full of teenagers leaving the scene of a party at the end of April 2017. Jordan was shot in the head. The officer, Roy Oliver, was fired. He allegedly lied about the incident. And some justice for the family of Walter Scott, whose 2015 gunning down in the back by then South Carolina officer Michael Slager was captured on video and went viral. A state jury trial deadlocked, but Slager pled guilty to federal charges of violating Scott's civil rights without justification. He faces life in prison and a $250,000 fine. Attorney General Jeff Sessions signed off on the Slager federal plea, but declined to intervene in the Alton Sterling case, raising concerns about how the Trump Justice Department will handle cases of police abuse or misconduct. Sterling was shot 6 times by 2 officers in Baton Rouge, Louisiana last year. His family expressed its disappointment in the federal inaction. And people are looking to the new Supreme Court. Newly confirmed Justice Neil Gorsuch has restored the 5-4 balance in favor of conservatives. His first vote, siding with his fellow conservative justices in denying a stay request from Arkansas death row inmates facing execution. Hours later, one of the men died from a lethal injection. So just for the numbers, 345 people have been fatally shot by police in 2017 so far. When you see that, we do want to say, though, that officer, Roy Oliver, has been charged with murder, and the family is suing the city just outside of Dallas for not training the police officer. And this is the case in so many instances where it can be said that police are just not up to the current challenges facing them, and are going after. I was shocked to learn that how many of those were shot in moving vehicles. All of this road rage that seems to be happening between drivers and passengers and police is really, a heightened issue. Did you want to?
I mean, it is and it isn't, because we don't see this happening to white Americans, right? I mean, in Louisiana, when the black and Latino officers shot into a car with a white man and his son, they are already in prison. That was quick, fast, in a hurry, right? We have to ask ourselves, why is a police officer shooting a shotgun into a car? Get a license plate, right? There are so many courses of action you can do, and then lying about it. And this is the piece where we see time and time again, police officers have been lying. The difference now is that all of us have video cameras on us and cameras where we can actually counteract these stories. But we even see now with Alton Sterling and Eric Garner, even when we can counteract the stories, it's like, well, you weren't taping from before the story. It's like, so now selling cigarettes or CDs or driving away from the police is subject to death, right? I mean, that is...
And it's not even those things that they're doing. Right? It's just the skin. It's just the skin. It's an immediate visceral reaction that police officers have to black and brown skin. It means shooting without any kind of consequence.
Well, I mean, I think, also when you have sort of what they practice on, which is, the black silhouette, and there's some legislation trying to get that changed.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? Because we've seen psychologists have studied, they see the black silhouette, they see the black skin, and that's what they go for. I also just think, if you all YouTube, white people with cops, you will see cops pleading with white boys, white women, white grown men with weapons, right? Please put the weapon down. I mean, these are minutes of just nothing happens. And then everything goes away peacefully and they might get arrested or talking to.
Right.
I mean,
and we do
endemic.
want to say that black women, Kim Crenshaw with the Say Her Name Project has done a wonderful film on Sandra Bland and all of the other women who, black women, trans women, who are never mentioned in these stories that we absolutely have to pay more attention to. We have a question from the audience. Yes.
Question?
Sure. My name is Zyphus LeBron. Rebecca, a moment ago you talked about needing a breather, and Carol just mentioned something as regards to mentioning the names of black and transgender and so forth. And there's a certain issue that kind of relates to a sort of a separation as regards to creating coalitions between blacks and whites as this effort moves forward for black people's rights. Do you think there needs to be more of a kind of a coalition building as regards to blacks and whites and kind of, pushing the agenda of black people? Because, I mean, back in the civil rights era, if there wasn't a white voice, a bit of a white voice there, a lot of the movement wouldn't have happened.
Talking about allies?
I think that's
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an interesting, important question that we've been grappling with, sort of culture-wide for the past 5 to 10 years. I mean, throughout time, but certainly since Ferguson. And I sort of feel like I've put that time in with building allies. I said earlier, my origin story is the backdrop is white supremacist, in some aspects more intentional than other. I was adopted into a white family. I had a white birth mother and a black birth father. The black birth father was sort of banished from the scene. And so I spent a lot of time sort of working through that and then sort of building allies and alliances in my adult life and now with my son. I don't think it's necessary to seek out white allyship. I do think that white allies will show up when it's real.
I think it's important that we understand that what we're experiencing in this moment is an adamant reassertion of whiteness. We're in the midst of an intensification, an intense white backlash. And that white backlash can be talked about, I think, in terms other than just simply black victimization. Mm-hmm. It has something to do with we could talk about the consequences of the embrace of the idea that white people matter more than others. Mm-hmm. And part of what that involves, right, is kind of telling the story and calling attention to the danger of those who identify themselves as white people. I happen to love a lot of people who happen to be white, but I'm really skeptical of those who identify themselves as white people. This is my channeling of James Baldwin, right? And it's because we have to ask ourselves, what are the consequences, right, of this idea of whiteness? Susan Sontag says it's the great cancer of the world, right? And it has something to do with a society that's organized, predicated upon the assumption that because some people are white, that they ought to be valued more than others. And then the society arranges itself in accordance to that belief. And so part of the solidarity work that we have to do is to engage in the deconstruction, not of the administrative state, but the deconstruction of whiteness, so that white working class brothers and sisters who are catching hell and black and brown working class brothers and sisters who are catching hell can find a way to mobilize, to organize together, to bring pressure to bear on those who want to exploit them all in the first place.
Because keep in mind, King wasn't killed when he was talking about mobilizing black people. He was killed when he was talking about mobilizing poor people. And that's black folks, white folks, and everyone else in between. I mean, I think we also have to realize if you have a country, not just based on white supremacy, but on the domination of women and people of color and everyone else. And when that's no longer, it seems like a reality for a lot of white folks, that is really scary for them. And so what does America look like when white men can't dominate everyone else, right? It is wholly irrational for white people to be fearful of black people. It is wholly rational for black people to be fearful of white people. Full stop, not just in this country, but across the diaspora and everywhere else. And so I think we're in this moment right now where these people who are white are really at a loss, right? And I think 8 years of Obama has exposed black excellence in a way that has been really earth-shattering to a lot of white folks.
My friend Ruby Sales, the
of course,
theologian, social activist, said one of the words that we need to get rid of is diversity, because it recognizes the supremacy of the major population, and you really have to talk about redefining democracy. And I want to, you know, these three people with no opinions whatsoever, as you can tell, have all been guests on Black America. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, Black America is a weekly conversation. We broadcast 8 times a week here on CUNY TV. We're online and by podcast, as I like to say, anytime, anywhere in the world. One of the things that we have every guest do at the end of the program is to finish the statement, the strength, the power of Black America lies in. And here's a sample of some of the answers we've gotten. One of the things that we ask all of our guests is to complete the sentence, which starts, the strength, the power of Black America lies in. How would you finish that?
The strength and power of Black America lies in the souls and the spirits of little black girls and boys.
The power of Black America, I think, rests almost entirely in its ability to survive all that it has, all that we have, and to still be able to laugh and dance and ache and fracture and reform and become something completely different and amazing and beautiful.
It lies in our ability to talk to each other and communicate with each other and stay together. It lies in the ability for us to act, to begin to try to act as one.
In its capacity to speak universal truth to power. We often think of black people speaking for black people, but black people have in this country often spoken truly for the significance and meaning of democracy because they felt the absence of it more than any other population.
African Americans are here to keep the United States moving forward towards the promise that those founding fathers laid down and weren't honoring in their own lives.
Where would we be without African American music? Visual art now has a big platform in Washington, D.C. So certainly our culture, our cooking, you name it, our style, it's our passport to the world and the world's passport to us.
As a people, we are the most talented people in the world. Jazz, blues, sports, sciences. If I had to focus on one person who I think showed that, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown. That's what Black America is.
The strength, the power of Black America lies in
our optimism and our effort, our youth.
I think it's important for them to see positive examples and role models and to know that their potential is limitless. And that's what I hope to always give them with my messaging.
I enjoy teaching based on the fact that we need to remind young people that they are our future.
Education has to be a lot more equitable. You know, it's not about giving everybody the exact same thing, but it's about giving everybody exactly what they need.
All we have to do is own the power that we already have. The spirit of our ancestors lives and breathes in us. If they could do what they did, certainly we can.
We come from a people who, over a way that with tears has been watered, they traveled across an ocean, cramped quarters, unbelievable dishumanity. And look at us. We survived, we thrived, we invented, we wrote, we changed the story, we've healed bodies, we've raised children, we've raised the bar. The strength in Black America is resilience.
So, and also the strength of Black America lies in our voices, and you three certainly have the voices. We're on look, we need 2 or 3 hours to really do this, you know, so we'll have to do this again. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the future. You mentioned a couple of times, 2018, 2020. What do you see, or the answer is not there in the elections that we're going to have that are between the Republican and Democratic parties? I mean, do you believe in that system still, or as some people out there on the street say, that's over and we need to find another way? What's your...
I mean, to be honest, I feel like I need to just get through these 4 years. And as a parent, I need to have conversations every day with my son, who I believe his generation is not going to stand for what we're seeing right now, but I've got to help him internalize that belief and really speak truth to power. So I'm really on a day-to-day kind of thing.
You know, for me, elections are always the last thing you do in a democracy. Right? Everything you do prior to that, right, is just as, if not more important than going into the voting booth. But if we're going to focus on what's happening, I think we need to take a look at what's happening in Jackson, Mississippi, with Lumumba being elected. We need to look at what's happening in Cincinnati with Yvette Simpson. We need to look at what's happening across the country at the local level when you see organizers beginning to challenge, right, for the reins of power in these local spaces. Because to my mind, and I have the political scientist here, to my mind, a lot of the innovation that's going to happen, that's going to open the doors for fundamental change, will actually take place at the local level. Because DC is so gummed up. And I think it's going to require us to step outside of the two-party system precisely because both of them are in the hands of Wall Street.
Well, as the resident political scientist, I believe in protest and electoral politics.
Yes.
I think that we have to focus on local, state, national. I think we can't wait until 2020. We have to think about, there's an election this year in New York City. 2 actually, 1 in September for the primaries, 1 in November, right? We have to make sure we know when we should be going to the polls. You know, organizations like Color of Change, they're getting DAs thrown out.
Absolutely.
Right? Across the country, because that's where a lot of the action is. You know, we've got mayors, we've got, you know, people aren't paying attention to who's going to Albany. People are going to Albany with 3,000 votes, controlling billions of dollars and deciding education for our kids, our bodies, who we can marry, all of these are housing. So I think, you know, also as far as Black folks are concerned, you know, we have a long and strong history of giving to the church. We do not have a long history of political giving. And so we see all these people in DC, we see people in our state houses that we're not happy about. But when young people or women, especially women of color, want to run, we don't really give them the money, right? Because there's an assumption that they can't win and they can't beat the system. You've got Stacey Abrams running for governor of Georgia. You've got Andrew Gillum running for governor of Florida.
Right.
They're both amazing.
Right.
She's early 40s, he's late 30s. I mean, these are people who need money.
Right.
they need black bodies to knock on doors, floor to floor, building to building.
I think Andrew Gillum has raised $1 million, which is being portrayed as a lot of money, but running
it's
for
the
governor
state
of Florida.
And so I think, we can also pay attention to races that aren't in our own cities. We can give Miss Simpson in Cincinnati $5 or $10 to make sure that she doesn't actually have to go to corporate interests only, because when she gets into office, then she'll owe them and not the people.
That's a great idea.
So quickly, what do you think about Kamala Harris and Cory Booker as potential presidential candidates?
It is too soon to
Kamala, anything.
Yeah, anything?
Anything all day.
Great.
Let me just be clear. Just because you're a person of color doesn't mean necessarily you have the politics that we need for this moment.
Okay, all right. Eddie's going to be examining the politics. We have a question. Yes?
Tell us your name and your question.
Hi, my name is Claudia Schreier, and I wanted to ask the panel, what about the all-male and all-white Senate panel determining our health care? How did we get here, and what do you think their priorities are?
I've said before, and I've gotten lots of hate mail from Breitbart about it, that's a deliberate visual.
Yeah.
Right? That is a white supremacist deliberate visual where this administration's president in particular wants people to see that it is white men in charge. There are no women, there are no people of color, there are no young people. And so for something like that is, and he is a master of the media, that is very specific, and it is on target, especially for his base.
Ditto.
Same, yeah. Yeah.
This is all it is.
Yeah.
And there's three things that they're trying to do that they can't do simultaneously. One, they want to repeal Obamacare, right? Which is just Romney care. Right? One, they want to repeal Obamacare. Two, they say they want to provide coverage at lower costs, right? And three, I can't even remember it. Right? None of these things can happen at the same time, right? Because they just can't. If you're going to provide coverage at a lower cost, it's going to cost money. The third is cut taxes. You can't do all three of them at the same time. Yeah. So they're selling you a 6 for a 9 because at the end of the day, what they're doing is setting up the tax cut for the rich and the wealthy that's coming down the pipe, period. And white men are doing it.
And in a lot of places where programs are being cut, black women especially are being impacted.
And the very people who voted for Trump.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this is not new. Look at the New Deal. FDR sold black women down the river that quickly, right? But it was for the good of the country, right? But the thing is, Trump supporters aren't going to waver, right? They believe in this mission. They have to believe in the mission. They have to believe that it's 1952 and coal's coming back, right? Because that is what their whiteness rests upon.
But it's
that they are
whiteness.
better than everybody else, right? And they've had 8 years of having this black man and all this black excellence and these black people who allegedly got everything for free. He's essentially saying it's not even dog whistle anymore. He's like, no. Let's go back to when we ruled the roost, right? Yep. How are you supposed to do that? Right. Coal's dead, right? But they don't want to hear it because they have to believe in something. So the same way Obama sold hope and change, Trump is selling it just in a different package. Yeah. He's just selling it to different people.
And just remember the recent data, the recent survey from the PRI and the Atlantic survey shows that two-thirds of white America think that America has lost ground since the 1950s. That a large number of the folks who voted for Trump are experiencing cultural anxiety. That cultural anxiety drove the voter, not economic anxiety.
And cultural anxiety, by cultural anxiety,
what
you
is
mean,
that?
It's getting brown.
It's a deep anxiety about the demographic shifts in this country. They're talking about the browning of America happening and da-da-da. It's already happened.
But the other thing is that what is America, what is culture in America without black and brown people? We are culture in America.
Cultural.
But I think also, the Jane Junn's data, right?
Yeah.
Jane Junn out of USC, she showed from 1952 to 2016, every single election, white women have voted for a Republican candidate with the exception of 2 years. 64 with LBJ, 96 Pete Clinton, right? So white women have been upholding this agenda from the beginning. So the fact that Hillary Clinton wasn't able to get white women, it's that shouldn't have been a shock.
And the average income of a Trump supporter was $72,000.
Abby, you have a question for us from Facebook?
Not just white working people.
What will it take to galvanize the black community to engage in the formal political process, given their long history of disenfranchisement?
Well,
And that's from Gail Pittman.
All
The
right.
political science data says proportionally we participate more, especially in presidential elections. We are actually more participatory in electoral
Well,
politics.
certainly black women,
Right.
but blacks as a whole. But in this last cycle, the numbers are down now that they are counting them.
The voter suppression, voter ID laws have played a significant
Exactly.
role.
This
in
is the
Virginia,
first time we went to the polls without the full protection of the Voting Rights Act of 1964.
Right,
So
and that was the
Wisconsin and
Supreme
Virginia in
Court
particular.
4 years ago that said states could do that, and in fact they are doing, requiring in some cases citizenship, proof of citizenship before you can vote, not just where do you live. And
So you can't really understand what happened in Virginia, you can't really understand what happened in North Carolina and what happened in Wisconsin without keeping track, and the data is very clear about this. Wherever there were voter ID laws, you saw a depression in black voter turnout.
Or
Right?
you can use your gun ID and not your school ID
Exactly.
in Texas, right? And so, I mean, these are very clear and deliberate ways in which the federal government has been in cahoots with the state and local governments to make sure that black people and Latinos are removed from the political process. I mean, it also, and this goes back to Eddie's point, you also have to have a candidate that motivates and speaks to people of color, right? So the Kamala Corey question is way too soon in 2020. They have not actually come into the community as of yet to really sort of make their case to be clear. So we can't just sort of, coronations don't work. We need campaigns.
so I want to ask you, what, Eddie?
That was a nice one there.
That was
That one.
I told you she's in demand, everywhere. This, even though she does get the hate mail for it, but well,
It comes with part of the job.
comes with the territory. But we've had some great guests on Black America. I'm going to ask you about the way forward when we come out of this clip. Opal Tometi, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, has a 5 things to do to survive the Trump era. So let's take a look at that if we can, courtesy of Mike.
People have been wondering what they should do since Trump has been elected. Here are 5 thoughts. My name is Opal Tometi. I'm a human rights activist, co-founder of Black Lives Matter, and the director for the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. First, let's nourish ourselves with words from our ancestors. Ella Baker tells us, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest." Sitting Bull says, "Let us put our minds together to see what kind of future we can make for our children." And Grace Lee Boggs says, "Building community is to the collective as spiritual practice is to the individual." Second, let's remain explicit that we are fighting for racial justice with an intersectional lens. We will center and show up for Black, Brown, Native, Muslim, immigrant, LGBTQ, folks with records, folks with disabilities, and poor communities. And we will defend ourselves from fascism, violence, rhetoric, and policies that harm us. Third, we'll resist corporate takeovers of Mother Earth and what is sacred. And we'll work to make visible the sovereignty of Native people like the water protectors and our kin in Flint. Fourth, we must perfect the art of organizing people, in person and in public spaces. If you aren't organized, find your people. Fifth, we must know our rights. Our organizations and First Amendment right to assemble have been threatened. Organizers have been jailed, and we are living under extreme surveillance in a national security state. We must ensure our security online and offline. If you're white, your work is to organize other white people to donate and challenge white supremacy. And if you find yourself in melanin spaces, learn to take direction from us. We'll show you when and how we need your support. We must not rest until we build a multiracial democracy that embraces the fullness of our spirits and human experience.
And that was Opal Tometi, Black Lives Matter, three women who really got us going, and of course they were the march organizers as well. So the way forward for each of you, I know that they mentioned water, Flint, Reverend Barber, our wonderful, wonderful man who talks about the weaponizing of water, and that's what's happened in many urban areas, affecting mostly black people, that their water is killing them. So what do you see as the way forward? Christina?
You know, I love and respect Opal, and I think she just really hit the nail on the head. You know, I try not to use the word ally. Ally doesn't imply that, you know, it sort of implies that you can kind of come in and leave,
Sure,
you know?
sure.
I like the word accomplice.
Accomplice.
You know, accomplice implies that you've got some skin in the game.
Right,
What is
right.
happening to me is happening to you as well, and we rise and we fall together. But I think going back to what Rebecca said, you know, this is a long and arduous journey that we're in. And I can't do all the work. It's not about Black women continuing to do all the work. Like, people need to also step up, not just take direction, but, you know, as when you're cleaning the house and it's like, well, Mom, what should I do? It's like, look around.
There's plenty to do.
There is plenty to do.
Yeah.
Like, you know, anticipate,
Yeah.
right? And so I think
Right.
that is something that
Yeah.
our accomplices need to do. I don't need to keep telling you what you need to do, right? I am working. And so I think that's the piece where it's like, and you know, this particular type of white supremacy it has some new elements to it. White supremacy isn't new. This particular grade of it is a little bit new. And so we still have to recognize that we know it, but we still need to learn it and study it so we can then fight it.
We have a minute each for
The
you
lesson,
to.
yeah, the lesson was invoked in, a lesson can be found in the invocation of Miss Ella Baker. There's a radical democratic vision that she exemplifies. There's a faith in the capacities of everyday ordinary people, that we're the leaders that we've been looking for. That's all we need to do is identify the problems that confront us right where we are. I think it's another thing that we need to add to Opal's list is you've got to keep track of the material conditions that affect the life chances of people, particularly the people we care most about. If we're not engaged in an ongoing critique of the economic realities and the material realities that cut short the life chances of folk, we will find ourselves being complicit. We will have debit cards with Black Lives Matter on it. We will become commodities. We will find ourselves in the circuitry of the market, reproducing the very material conditions that contribute to our oppression.
As I said earlier, and what Opal said as well, you know, find your people, posse up and stay alive and protect our culture and galvanize our grief and move forward.
Okay.
And lastly, read.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Is that what you do now?
That's what the children do, yes.
Well, listen, this has been a fantastic discussion. I thank all three of you are just amazing. Come back on the show individually and as another town hall. To our audience, thank you so much. Your questions were great, your participation great, and to our Facebook viewers, we want to thank you out there as well. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and we will see you the next time.